If this giant group of Jewish billionaires is running a sex trafficking operation targeting American politicians and business people and stuff, you think they're working with an Arab or Muslim nation in the Middle East?
My name is Kieran, I'm 20 years old and I reverted to Islam 2 years ago, alhamdulillah. Did you know that teaching a new Muslim like me
the entire Salah
for the next 50 years just costs £10?
every time they wake up for Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha,
you get the reward. You could sponsor Salah mats for just £100
and help 10 new Muslims learn how to pray Salah. Click the button or the link and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel and to donate to Salah Plus so we can help reverts learn how to pray this Ramadan. Joe Rogan just hosted investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker Ian Carroll on his show, where Ian not only exposed shocking information regarding Israel's dark and underhanded tactics to disrupt the Middle East, but also how they manipulate and control the West. Let's look at the first clip where he tells Joe Rogan why American politicians do Israel's bidding so willingly.
Out of all the information that's getting disclosed, supposedly this administration, what do you have the least faith that we're going to come to
Epstein,
a conclusion?
for sure.
Epstein.
And I think it's because of Israel. I
Really?
think that because I mean, when you really dig into Epstein, his entire network was Israel. It was clearly. Like Ehud Barak was the ex-prime minister and the ex-head of Israeli intelligence. Leslie Wexner was one of the most powerful pro-Israeli philanthropists. The whole organization was Israel.
So
and I'm not saying it was all of Israel.
It was all an intelligence gathering and
it was targeting Americans. It was targeting American officials and the American president.
Right.
Certainly they had help from the CIA, and certainly they had help from these other organized crime and intelligence operations. Like, so, for example, Dan Bongino, the new, deputy director of the FBI, he said on camera that Epstein was working for an intelligence agency in the Middle East. And I don't know which one, but someone in the Middle East. But I'm looking at, okay, Dan, so if this giant group of Jewish billionaires is running a sex trafficking operation targeting American politicians and business people and stuff, you think they're working with an Arab or Muslim nation in the Middle East? You think that Leslie Wexner is devoting his entire life to philanthropies on behalf of Israel, but then he's going to work for Saudi Arabia when he's doing this trafficking ring? Because he won't get the job if he says Israel.
Exactly.
Because Israel has so much control over our government right now. I was doing a 9/11 video on my YouTube, and I knew about the dancing Israelis conspiracy theory that is very much a real set of documents. And I knew that I'm not allowed to talk about Israel for some reason, and I didn't really know why. And I switched to researching Israel and Palestine and the history there and what's going on and the propaganda and what it all was. The state of the Israeli influence that sustained them for so long, that was essential to them surviving this long. Jeffrey Epstein is the perfect example of this. Jeffrey Epstein was the world's most prolific and evil sex trafficker that we know of so far, ever. And he very clearly was a Jewish organization of Jewish people working on behalf of Israel and other groups. And so that's a dark stain on Israel and on the Jewish people if you own it.
You can talk about this now,
Exactly.
post-October 7th.
It opened wide open.
Post-Gaza.
As you saw, Ian Carroll stated that powerful Jewish billionaires in cahoots with US intelligence agencies and organised crime rings ran trafficking operations involving American politicians with young women and girls in order to blackmail them to do Israel's bidding. This is literally like some mafia stuff you would see in movies. Ian also said this is why the US refused to release the files detailing the client list of the most notorious trafficker of women and girls of all time and staunch Zionist Jeffrey Epstein, as many American politicians and figures of influence would be implicated in these depraved acts of abuse. Ian also claimed that this pattern of blackmail of US government officials by Israel runs all the way back to 9/11, as well as the historic oppression of Palestine, where the Israeli government have been responsible for crimes against humanity, whilst ensuring America covers their tracks. As Joe said, it's because of the sheer acts of evil during the recent genocide in Gaza that people are investigating Israel's dark history and exposing these facts. So for anyone online or otherwise that supports Israel and their Zionist regime, this is what you're supporting: mob tactics, blackmail, trafficking of minors, and the genocide of innocent men, women, and children. All of you are an absolute disgrace. Let's look at the next clip where Ian Carroll takes a deep dive into the history of Israel's corruption dating back to when they first colonized Palestine and formed their Zionist state on stolen land.
The people that founded Israel were a bunch of organized crime figures in America, the Jewish mob, that were helping with money and with arms trafficking. And it was the Rothschild banking family sending a whole bunch of money and getting the declaration in the first place. And then the people that were there, the three different organizations, the Irgun, the Lehi group, and the Haganah, those were the three like paramilitary groups that fought to found Israel. When Israel was officially founded, they officially designated Irgun and Lehi as terrorist organizations because they had been bombing civilians. They'd been bombing British civilians. The first official act of terror before they changed the definition was the bombing of the King David Hotel. The guy who planned that bombing later became the prime minister of Israel. They were bombing civilians. And like, so when those are the groups that are fighting to found that nation, even if all the Jews there are wonderful people, the leadership is inherently composed of these people that have been deeply corrupt for all time. And so you get this fertile ground for this kind of deep state effect to take power. And when you start to research the heads of state of Israel over history, you realize that a bunch of them were in those groups doing those terrorist acts and have done a bunch of dark stuff because those were the people that were at the top of that military organization. Those terrorist organizations reformed to form the IDF. When I first researched it, I came across this documentary on Rumble called The Occupation of the American Mind, which is a very well put together documentary that is mostly Jewish people speaking about the history of Israel and about how they realized in the 80s when there was this specific operation where they wound up bombing a refugee camp in a place called Sabra and Shatila. I guess it was a massacre, it wasn't a bombing. And it was the first time where Western journalists had taken video cameras over there and video feed were coming back of the conflict of what was happening. And American sentiment turned really harshly against Israel in the 80s there. And they realized we don't need to win just the kinetic war. We need to win the ideological war on the global scale. Because if we don't win that ideological war, the whole world will turn against us and call us a colonial project. That's when they switched to a propaganda war and they started targeting the United States with propaganda. And they hired the world's top propagandists to teach Israelis and Israeli military officials and government officials how to communicate with the West and how to propagandize the West so that we would remain in the dark a little bit. That's why we have this veil and this anti-Semitism thing and this like all that. It's why you're not allowed to talk about it because it evolved over time. There's a report online that came out in 2009, I think, called the Israel American Language Dictionary. And it's basically a word for word. This is how you discuss the rockets raining down. This is how you discuss the settlements. This is how you discuss the occupation and the palace and all these things. And they use examples of words that work and words that don't work. And when you read it, you realize like, holy shit, that's exactly what politicians have been saying on TV my entire life. Empathizing with the other side and making us understand that like we're here for peace and they're the terrorists. I say that to mean that we live inside this propagandized space because it's been essential to them for so long to protect that image in order to continue the deep state element of what they're doing. When I would argue that we would all be much better off if Bibi was not there and we had a more sane person in charge of Israel that was actually there for peace and not there for whatever the Bibi is doing.
Ian Carroll claimed that the people who founded Israel were mobsters, bankers, and arms dealers. That is crazy to me, but this does explain why Israel is such a corrupt country, as their very culture is based upon organised crime. And when you combine that with the fact that many of their prime ministers, heads of state, and top politicians were historically members of extremist groups that not only killed Muslim civilians, but also British people, as Ian said, then we have a comprehensive explanation of why Israel operates in the way they do. I was unaware that those very same Zionist extremist groups responsible for targeting Arabs and Westerners reformed to form the current Israeli army, the IDF, as Ian Carroll claimed. However, this again explains their complete lack of empathy and their psychopathic mission to genocide the Palestinian people. I'm glad that Ian brought up the Sabra and Shatila massacre in Lebanon in 1982, where Israeli militias killed nearly double or triple the amount of people in just over a day that they claim were taken out on October 7th. I am in no way condoning the loss of life on October 7th. However, I am making the point that Israel uses that date to signify the scale of devastation their people suffered, whilst covering up the fact that they themselves have done much worse. Ian Carroll stated that when Western journalists reported on Israel's massacre of 3,500 Palestinian refugees in Sabra and Shatila in the 80s, it was met with a huge amount of backlash in America, which prompted Israel to heavily invest in propaganda to shape Western perspectives into supporting their evil objective of ethnic cleansing and colonization. And this intertwined with their espionage tactics and blackmail of Western government officials is a formula Israel follows to this very day. Ian also claimed that the Israeli government even even has pre-scripted responses for US politicians to reframe and communicate Zionist war crimes as if they are justified and are for the greater good, despite these heinous acts involving the elimination of millions of innocent people. And the current Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is just the latest rendition and embodiment of this very same corruption. As Ian Carroll said, in order for things to change, we need a major political shift. But with the West unequivocally supporting Israel's evil objectives, it doesn't look like it's going to come soon, that is, if it even comes at all. The first step is exposing the dark truth of Israel's sinister reality from when they came into existence to the modern day, as Ian Carroll and many others like him are doing on massive platforms like Joe Rogan's. As this shifts the global perspective, as people realise the scale of the tyranny, exploitation and subjugation Israel and the Zionist entity are responsible for. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group through the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.